A window stands in silence. Its glass dimmed by time, its frame touched by shadows. Through it, a faint light filters, fragile, almost hesitant, as if the world itself is holding its breath. It is here, behind such a window, that a young girl once sat. A girl who carried no sword, no crown, no stage. Only a pen, and a notebook bound in simple fabric. She was just 13 years old when she began to write. 13. An age of secrets whispered to a diary, of laughter hidden beneath blankets, of dreams too big for the walls of any room. And yet, without knowing, she would leave behind the most read diary in history. Words not intended for the world, but for herself. Words that would survive, even when she could not. But who was Anne Frank before she became a symbol carved into our collective memory? Who was the girl behind the myth, before history turned her into an icon? How did a teenager, living between four narrow walls, endure the collision of ordinary adolescence with the extraordinary cruelty of war? How did she manage to weave love into fear, hope into despair, laughter into silence? This is not just the story of a diary. It is the story of a voice. A voice too tender to be broken by bombs. Too human to be buried by hatred. Too alive to be silenced, even by death itself. Anne Frank was born in Frankfurt, Germany, in June of 1929. Her arrival was not marked by headlines, nor by history's weight, but by the soft joy of a family welcoming a second daughter. Otto and Edith Frank were ordinary parents, filled with the same hopes every parent carries, that their children might grow in safety, learn in freedom, laugh without fear. Anne's earliest years were wrapped in the gentle rhythm of family life. She played with her older sister, Margot. She ran through streets that still felt familiar and safe. Her world was defined not by the march of armies, but by the warmth of bedtime stories and the taste of childhood treats. But in the background, a darker tide was rising. In 1933, when Anne was just 4 years old, the Nazi Party seized power in Germany. For Jewish families, the air itself seemed to change. What once felt like home began to close its doors. Prejudice crept into schools, into neighborhoods, into daily life. Otto and Edith saw what was coming. They chose exile over submission. With courage stitched into quiet decisions, the Franks moved to Amsterdam. For a time, it felt like a reprieve. The city opened its arms with canals and bicycles, with new friends and new beginnings. Anne thrived there. She was lively, outspoken, quick to laugh. She filled classrooms with chatter, collected friends with ease, and lived the ordinary miracles of childhood. Her teachers called her spirited, perhaps even mischievous. To Anne, the world still seemed vast, and her place within it secure. But history has a way of stealing innocence without permission. In 1940, the German army invaded the Netherlands. Overnight, the shadows Anne's parents had fled found them once more. Restrictions began to multiply. Jews were banned from certain schools, from public spaces, from ordinary freedoms. Step by step, the walls of her childhood began to narrow. Imagine, for a moment, being 11 years old and told that your playground is forbidden, your friendship severed, your future already threatened by forces you cannot understand. Anne, still filled with curiosity, still blooming into adolescence, was asked to grow up far too quickly. And here lies the question her story presses upon us. How often do we notice the small blessings of our routines? The casual walk to school, the laughter with friends, the security of tomorrow feeling open. We rarely cherish them, until the moment they are stolen. By the summer of 1942, the world around Anne Frank had become unbearable. Jews were being deported, families disappearing without return. The Franks knew that time was running out. And so, with quiet precision and the help of trusted friends, Otto Frank prepared a hiding place, a concealed annex behind his office building on Prinsengracht in Amsterdam. It was July when the family slipped into silence. Carrying only a few belongings, Anne clutched her most precious possession, her red-checked diary, a gift for her 13th birthday. She could not have known that this simple notebook would become her voice to eternity. The annex was no palace. It was a cluster of cramped rooms, hidden behind a movable bookcase. For members of the Frank family shared it with 4 others, the Van Pels family and, later, Fritz Pfeffer, a dentist. 8 souls confined to a space where every step had to be measured, every whisper guarded, every day an exercise in patience and endurance. Life in the annex was a strange mixture of monotony and terror. The smallest sound could betray them to the outside world. During working hours, they walked softly, spoke in whispers, never daring to run water or move furniture. Below them, employees unaware of their presence carried on with daily business. Above them, fear sat like a constant shadow. Yet, within these suffocating walls, life continued. Meals were shared in awkward silence or burst into laughter muffled behind hands. Tempers flared over trivial matters, the division of food, the arrangement of space, the clash of personalities forced into such closeness. Anne, with her sharp tongue and restless spirit, often found herself in conflict with the adults, particularly with Fritz Pfeffer. But there were also moments of tenderness. Her sister Margot's calm presence softened arguments. Otto, her father, became her anchor, the figure she turned to when her spirit wavered. And even in hiding, Anne discovered the beginnings of first love with Peter Van Pels, the quiet boy who shared her confinement. Their friendship unfolded in hesitant conversations, secret glances, and the comfort of human connection in a world that seemed to have abandoned it. Anne wrote everything down. Her anger at the bickering, her dreams of freedom, her fears of discovery, her longing for a normal adolescence. Page after page, she gave voice to the contradictions of being both a child and a prisoner. And so, while the world outside burned with war, inside the annex pulsed the fragile heartbeat of ordinary family life. While the world outside was on fire, one might say, inside that annex echoed the everyday life of a family struggling to survive. It was a world of shadows and whispers, but also of resilience and hope. For though the annex was meant to hide them, it also revealed them, not as faceless victims, but as human beings, flawed, loving, fearful, and profoundly alive. In the silence of the annex, Anne found a world that could not be locked away. A world made of ink and paper. Her diary became her most trusted friend, the companion to whom she could reveal everything that could not be spoken aloud. She gave it a name, Kitty, as if the pages themselves were alive. To Kitty she confided her fears, her frustrations, her longing to step outside, to breathe the open air, to feel the sun without fear. Each entry was a dialogue, not with the world, but with herself, a way to keep her spirit intact when reality pressed too heavily against her youth. And wrote about the suffocating tension of 8 people forced into silence, the petty quarrels, the moments of tenderness, the heavy atmosphere that sometimes felt unbearable. But she also wrote about dreams, to become a writer, a journalist, someone whose words mattered. In those private pages, the girl imprisoned by walls was already free. And amid the shadows, another light flickered, the slow awakening of adolescence. Peter Van Pels, quiet, awkward, withdrawn, began to occupy her thoughts. At first, she dismissed him as dull, uninterested, even irritating. But in time, his presence became a comfort. They would steal moments together in the attic, where the beams of the house whispered old secrets and where, for a few stolen minutes, the war seemed to vanish. There, Anne discovered the tenderness of first love. Their conversations were tentative, filled with shyness and wonder. A glance held longer than expected. A hand touched by accident, yet remembered with intensity. In Peter, Anne found not just companionship but the reflection of her own yearning, the desire to live fully, even when the world conspired against life itself. She wrote of these feelings with candor. She wrote of the confusion of growing up, of the changes in her body, of the hunger for freedom, for identity, for intimacy. Her diary became the sanctuary where no judgment existed, where she could be both vulnerable and bold, both child and woman becoming. And through her words, something extraordinary happened. The diary ceased to be only about hiding. It became about being. About the persistence of joy, the discovery of love, the insistence of the human heart to keep beating even when surrounded by fear. And reminds us of a truth too often forgotten, that even in the darkest hours, the heart insists on loving. That hope can bloom in places where light barely reaches. That war may steal a childhood, but it cannot erase the pulse of humanity. For within her diary, Anne Frank carved a voice that refused to be silenced, a voice that belongs not only to history, but to all who still believe in the power of love, even in times of despair. August, 1944. For more than 2 years, the walls of the secret annex had guarded their whispers, their laughter, their quarrels, their dreams. But one morning, the silence shattered. The door was broken open, and armed men entered. The hiding place was discovered. Anne, her family, and their companions were pulled from the shadows into the blinding reality of arrest. The rooms that had held their fragile existence were left behind, the chairs, the dishes, the traces of everyday life that testified to their struggle. And on a desk, the red-checked diary lay waiting, abandoned in the rush, as though holding its breath for what would come next. They were taken away, first to Westerbork, a transit camp, then to Auschwitz, the name that even now chills the soul. In the chaos of trains, barking dogs, shouted orders, and was no longer the spirited girl of schoolyards, nor the restless teenager of the attic. She was reduced to a number, swallowed by a system built to erase names, identities, and hope. Yet in that system, even amid the cruelty, the diary survived. Miep Gies, one of the loyal friends who had risked everything to protect the Franks, returned to the annex after the arrest. She found the pages scattered on the floor. She gathered them gently, as though cradling a heartbeat, and kept them safe. She did not read them. She only preserved them, believing one day they would be returned to their owner. But Anne would not return. In late 1944, she and Margot were transported to Bergen-Belsen. There, amid hunger, disease, and despair, the sisters clung to one another, trying to summon fragments of hope. But in March 1945, only weeks before the camp was liberated, Anne's young life came to an end. She was 15 years old. 15. An age when most are preparing for futures wide open, and faced instead a future extinguished by hatred. Her body was silenced. Her laughter ceased. Her footsteps vanished into the mud of a camp designed to annihilate. But the diary remained. The words she wrote in secret, the words she never meant for the world to see, endured. They outlived the war, the camps, the cruelty. They carried her voice beyond death, beyond silence, beyond time. The body was silenced. The voice was not. And Frank, the girl who lived in hiding, who dreamed of becoming a writer, who confided her heart to paper, became what she longed for, a voice that could not be erased. Her diary, saved by chance and by love, became not only the story of one girl, but the echo of millions whose voices were taken before they could be heard. And in that echo, humanity itself is called to remember. In 1945, the war ended. Europe was a landscape of ruins, haunted by silence and loss. Of the 8 who had lived in the annex, only one returned, Otto Frank. A father without wife, without daughters, carrying the unbearable weight of survival. When Miep Gies placed Anne's diary in his hands, Otto hesitated. He knew it was all that remained of her. He opened its pages with trembling fingers and found himself face to face with the voice of his child, a voice that spoke with honesty, humor, longing, and wisdom far beyond her years. It was not just the diary of a teenager. It was the portrait of a soul refusing to be crushed. Otto realized her words were not meant to be hidden. They carried a truth too urgent, too luminous to remain in silence. In 1947, the diary of a young girl was published in Amsterdam. What began as a private conversation between Anne and her imaginary friend, Kitty, became a dialogue with the world. Soon it crossed borders, translated into more than 70 languages, read by millions across generations. Readers encountered not only history, but themselves within her pages. Her laughter, her quarrels, her dreams, her first love, all preserved against the backdrop of humanity's darkest hour. She reminded the world that behind statistics and mass graves are individual lives, each irreplaceable, each burning with its own light. Anne's diary became more than a book. It became a mirror. A mirror of resilience, of innocence confronting brutality, of the enduring power of hope. And in this mirror, humanity was forced to look at itself. To ask, how could such cruelty extinguish such a voice? How could a girl so alive be denied her future? But Anne's voice insists on something greater than tragedy. It insists on love, on the stubborn persistence of the human heart. In the midst of oppression, she wrote of beauty. In the midst of fear, she dreamed of freedom. In the midst of despair, she still believed in goodness. She wrote as a girl, we might say, but her words remain as the conscience of us all. For Anne Frank's diary is not only about the past. It is about the present, and every moment when hatred seeks to silence compassion, when fear threatens to overcome hope. Her words remind us that even in the smallest room, even in the narrowest confinement, the soul can remain vast. That the pen is mightier than violence. That a girl's heart can speak to the conscience of the world. Anne's legacy is not only what was lost, but what was preserved, the proof that love, truth, and memory are stronger than death. We will never hear the adult voice of Anne Frank. We will never know the woman she might have become, the books she might have written, the family she might have raised, the dreams she might have fulfilled. But what she left behind echoes across time, a voice that speaks to every generation that refuses to remain silent in the face of injustice. Her words are not bound to the 1940s. They reach into our present, calling us to remember, to reflect, to act. And once wrote that, in spite of everything, she still believed people were truly good at heart. Those words remain both a comfort and a challenge. Can we live in a way that proves her right? And here, a question arises, one that turns her diary into a mirror for each of us. If Anne's diary were written today, what would you record from your own heart? Would it be fear or faith? Bitterness or compassion? Would your words testify to silence, or to courage? The story of Anne Frank is not only about what was taken. It is about what endures. It is about the spark of humanity that refuses to be extinguished, even when surrounded by darkness. So let her legacy be more than remembrance. Let it be an invitation. May your voice never be silenced by fear. May your words carry the courage to defend love, to seek truth, to stand firm even in shadows. For the world does not need fewer voices, it needs more that dare to speak, more that dare to hope, more that dare to love. Anne's diary ended. But your story is still being written.